Welcome back to My Business Academia. Today I'm joined by Aaleen Anjum, a VC analyst at Two Small Fish Ventures. Hi, Aaleen. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. So, just a little bit of background before we get into things. You hold an MBA from Schulich. Before that, you have a BA in psychology and biology from the University of New Brunswick. You were pretty active in the community through the YMCA, and you helped set up Atlantic Canada's first multifaceted mental health youth center. So you've done a lot. So this is going to be a good
Yep.
episode. Let's just start by asking what made you decide to go into the MBA program?
Um, yeah, great question. Like as you know, I grew up in St. John, New Brunswick, which is a very small, tight-knit community. Um, and one of the things that one of my friends and I noticed in I think my second or third year of my undergraduate program, so I was studying biology and psychology, was how limited the resources were for mental health services for youth in particular. And so we decided to set up KV Oasis, which was the first of its kind. It was a mental health youth center that was a clinic where students could come after school, get mental health care through psychiatric nurses or therapists or psychiatrists, but then also get programming to help with school and homework and things like that. So through that, I kind of was exposed to the world of entrepreneurship and really setting something up and building something from nothing. And I kind of fell in love with that. My plan before kind of that whole experience was to go to med school and to pursue sort of, the pre-med path. But after that, I really fell in love with the idea of replicating that, but at a bigger scale. And so I had no idea how I was going to do that. Had no like real plan for how I was going to do that, but that was really what opened up my um, perspective. And then I ended up getting married and moving to Toronto. And my husband, Omer, he comes from a very, very entrepreneurial background. So he is a lawyer, but also a tech startup founder. And he really encouraged me to pursue an MBA. And I think the MBA really helped kind of push me out of my comfort zone. And I knew that I was coming from a very science heavy background, doing a lot of research, always in the lab, didn't really have a lot of the hard skills that I thought I might need to, pursue that dream of making another, building another center, for example. Um, and so I knew I had to go do my MBA for that. So uh, definitely, definitely pushed me out of my comfort zone. And I think the MBA really like opens your perspective on the world as well. Um, I think it's one of the most important things that kind of helped me build my network and develop my interpersonal skills. And then it was eventually what kind of opened me up to the world of VC as well.
Yeah, that's a really, really inspiring origin story. Shout out KB Oasis. They're still up and running and helping the community, so good for them.
They are.
Yeah, so during your MBA program, like I'm looking at a lot of the things you were involved in, co-president of Net Impact, co-president of Advanced Strategy Club, all of that on top of your coursework,
Oh my
internships,
God.
placements, those kind of things. How did you how did you manage your time and decide what to get involved in and like like I'm talking to people in my cohort and stuff and it's a lot for them to even be involved in one club, let alone being like a co-president of two clubs at the same time. So how did you manage that?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my God. If you were in my like 601 group or in my close group of friends, you would know that it was really hard. I really, really struggled to manage my workload with all of my commitments on top of, the extracurricular stuff. And then, like you said, I wasn't just joining a club, I was the co-president of two clubs, and I was also working part-time at the time. And it was just a lot. Um, I absolutely took on more than I could handle, um, for sure. But if I don't think I would change anything. Like if I was to go back and do it all again, I would definitely do it all again because it taught me so much about leadership and people management skills and interpersonal skills. And it was really, really hard. But I think I quickly learned how to delegate tasks very efficiently to other members of my team. I think figuring out how to prioritize your time and your tasks is so important. Learning how to say no is also very important. I took me a while to learn that one, but and eventually knew I had to. And like I said, prioritizing tasks. So if we had a meeting or an upcoming, meeting that didn't need to be on Zoom, I would just write a memo and send it to the team. Like I was all about like we don't always have to be on the phone. We don't always have to, be on Zoom. And then the other thing was, delegating tasks to your team. So if somebody can do something better than you, like let them do it. That was my motto. And don't be afraid to like reach out for help. Um, Looking back, I think I could have delegated more than I did, for sure. But I remember one of the class in, I think it was one of the organizational behavior classes that we had to take. They were talking about this concept where there's this idea of the imperfect leader. I don't know if you
Yeah,
have
a
come
little bit of
across
an
that
introduction
yet.
so far.
Right. So it's sort of like about how there's this myth that, of a complete leader, right? This flawless person who like has it all figured out, they have everything together. When in reality, like a true, really good, efficient leader is someone that acknowledges their own strengths, their own weaknesses, and then it's all about sort of effectively managing your teams um, to kind of rely on them and then make up for the missing skills that you have. So I learned that you don't have to do it all. Just trust your team, have a good team, and delegate. It was a lot of work, especially with the 601, but I survived somehow.
Yeah,
So
exactly. It does sound like a lot of work, and you definitely did pick up the skills. It sounds like that kind of you were able to transfer into your career later on.
yeah.
Do you have any advice for maybe some of the executive teams of clubs, like how to maybe run successful events or just increase engagement?
Yeah, oh my gosh. So when I was the co-president for both in that Impact and then the Schulich Advanced Strategy Club, it was like the peak of COVID. It was so hard to get students to engage because Zoom fatigue was like a very real thing. Um, Nobody wanted to pay to attend a Zoom event, right? It just wasn't something that people were interested in at the time. And so for us, we were like, okay, it has to be worth people's time. It has to be worth people's money because a lot of memberships, a lot of school clubs, they were charging membership fees during the time, and so we did as well. The advice I gave to the executive team that was coming in after me was that don't be afraid to just put on amazing events. Like reach out to crazy, crazy cool people. Because what's the worst that can happen? Like they'll ignore your message or they just won't they'll say no, like it's fine. So we really went above and beyond and got some really cool folks to do some, speaker series and events, even though they were on Zoom. And we also, I think it was through Net Impact, during the time when the Black Lives Matter movement was just picking up, we were the first club in Canada to actually have a Canada-wide panel discussing, the kind of racial bias in the corporate ecosystem. And so that was Canada wide. We reached out to every university in Canada, invited everybody. We had people from the States speaking. It was a really cool event. So like don't limit yourself to like the Shula community, which I think sometimes we feel like imposter syndrome and it's like, oh, but they're just gonna say no. Like just reach out to people. People love, talking about themselves and their work. So go on LinkedIn, find really cool people and just message them and
Yeah,
ask them to
thanks.
do events.
That's really good advice. I really like the idea about reaching, like aiming high, trying to get those very experienced
Yeah,
speakers and guests. I know, like in Net Impact, I'm a member of that club, and the co-president kind of aligns with that too. He's like, just aim high. We'll see who we can get, and we'll go from there.
exactly. Exactly.
Perfect. So let's talk a little bit about your internship at Amplitude Ventures. Firstly, did you do that during, like, in between your first and second year?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
So that was
cool.
in between.
So how did you get involved in that?
So I forget which platform it was specifically, but it was like through Schulich. Once you're at that point in the summer when you're applying for internships, they have this platform. I cannot remember the name at all. Um,
The handshake.
it- yes, it's like it's orange handshake. So it was through handshake. Just randomly saw this position. Amplitude Ventures, had never heard of them before. At this point, I was really, attending a lot of Schulich startup events, Schulich Venture Club events. I also started a blog in my first year where I was interviewing female entrepreneurs. And so I was really curious about the startup world and was really excited about how people were just, building platforms and technologies to solve like really interesting problems. And that's how I kind of got into researching what the VC world was. So the other side of that ecosystem. So when I saw the position for Amplitude Ventures, I thought this is perfect. I'm literally coming from a science background. And I was really interested in med tech in particular when I was researching VC, just because of my background. And Amplitude is a precision medicine VC fund in Canada, and it's one of the biggest. So they were hiring for an intern. I applied, really just um, wrote a cover letter, told them how excited I was about the opportunity, and talked a lot about, their portfolio companies and some of the work that they were doing, and made it through 2 rounds of interviews, and then um, I got that internship through that.
Was the internship as like an analyst at Amplitude Ventures?
Honestly, pretty much like the work that I was doing was very similar to the work that the other analysts were doing on the team. A lot of it was, uh, you know, sitting with startups, listening to them pitch, deciding whether it was, a good fit for the company, the fund. But what I think what's special about Amplitude is that they don't just invest in startups through their fund. They actually build companies internally too. So their team is phenomenal. Like I was very lucky to be working with that team. Most of them are coming from very intense research backgrounds. So, PhDs in very niche science areas. Some of them are, previously physicians who are now turned VCs. And so it was a lot of going through research from, the top universities like UBC, for example, and finding really cool researchers and what they're doing in the medtech space, and then seeing, okay, how can we commercialize their research? So like, let's build a team around this, and build a company and a startup, and then invest in them. So it was really cool to be part of that. And then we also were, I think, Repair Therapeutics, they IPO'd that summer too, so I got to be part of that, which was really exciting. Um, but yeah, huge learning curve, even though I was coming from a science background. Like I remember having, that was my first job in VC, so I was like getting used to all the jargon, the VC jargon, the startup jargon. I used to sit in meetings and be like, I have no idea what anybody is saying. And then I would like Google and research, and just it was a huge learning curve for sure. But um, an amazing first sort of foray into the VC world for sure.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's kind of like a bit of a learning curve, of course, and then it definitely I think set you up for your next venture through Entrepreneurship 6960, the mentorship match.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that. How did that go? How did you get into it, and where did you end up working?
Yes. Yes. Oh my God. I have nothing but amazing, positive, good things to say about 6960, as I'm sure you know, and have heard me talk about before. But um, yeah, I remember Chris Carter was telling me about this program, and at the time it was the second cohort. So before I applied, there was just one other kind of cohort that had done it. So it was a very fresh, very new program. Didn't really know much about it. But one thing I knew was it is really hard to break into venture capital. Like it is very, very difficult. And Chris, encouraged me to apply, and he said that, this is going to be a great opportunity for you. And so I applied. I really wanted to be paired with Eva Lau at Two Small Fish Ventures. Um, that's where I eventually, got the placement. Um, and yeah, definitely one of the most amazing courses. And I think without 6960, I probably wouldn't have gotten, you know, where I am today in BC without, that stepping stone for sure.
That's awesome. So you're an analyst at Two Small Fish Ventures now. Did you kind of just continue right after graduation from that
Yeah,
mentorship match straight into Two Small Fish?
exactly. Interestingly enough, so like I said, this was the second cohort of the program. So at the time, Two Small Fish was a very small team. It was Eva, and then Tarun, who was the other analyst, and he was also a 6960 student from Schulich who got hired right after he finished the program. So, I went into the mentorship match without anticipating like I'm going to get a job here. It was more like I'm just going to learn absolutely everything I can from Eva and everything I can about the generalist VC space because amplitude was very niche, right? It was just specifically precision medicine. Eva and Two Small Fish was generalist, so I got to see a bunch of different ecosystems. And so I went in just trying to learn anything and everything. But she ended up hiring me right after I graduated from my MBA program. So that was amazing. So yeah, right after I finished school, she offered me a full-time position. And it was cool because it was kind of like I was working at a startup because it was just Eva, myself, and Tarun. And we just grew from there. And we recently raised our third fund, which is really exciting too.
So you mentioned that while you were working, like you're looking at a lot of different ecosystems. Do you have one in particular that you're kind of more fond of than others?
Yeah, I mean, even though I love looking at, a bunch of different areas. MedTech was still like my favorite thing. And because of my background, that was an area that I always led. But within MedTech, um, there's a growing space called Femtech. So you're looking at, technology that's serving um, women, their healthcare needs specifically. And it's a growing space and it's really exciting. So I would say femtech, but also edtech, so educational technology as well. We recently invested in an edtech company that's based out of New York, and they are basically building, literacy programs for students in schools through interactive videos, and it's EdTech is a huge, huge space. There's a lot of funding going into it right now. And that's another area that I really, really love as well.
Yeah, those sound like two really interesting areas. So, as an analyst at a VC firm, what kind of tasks do you do on a daily basis?
Yeah, it's always a question I get asked, and I'm always like, it's so different like every single day. But typically, it involves a lot of meetings, just given the nature of the job. As an analyst, you're typically responsible for deal sourcing, you're building your funds deal funnel, you're diligencing different opportunities, analyzing different opportunities and deals. And then, of course, you're constantly doing a bunch of market research on, any sector that's relevant to your company's investment thesis. So you are also having, alongside all that, you're having internal meetings with your team. So it's a lot of meetings, a lot of meetings and a lot of research day to day, I would say.
How many of those meetings would be like pitches from other companies looking for investments?
Oh, I would say like 90%. Like 90% of my meetings were with companies, listening to pitches. And then beyond that, I would kind of split my time between doing research or, maybe there's an opportunity that we're currently looking into, and then it's, analyzing different things with regards to whether we should actually invest or not. But mostly it's meetings with startups for sure.
When you're meeting with those startups and listening to those pitches, are there certain things that those companies should do, and they should, and other things that they really need to avoid when pitching their business?
Oh yeah, for sure. I feel like after I can confidently give advice on this now that I've seen like over, hundreds upon hundreds of pitches, and the ones that really stand out, are the ones that tell a really good story. And they paint a very clear and concise picture of, the problem that they're trying to solve, but also why they're the ones that can actually solve it. And I think so for Two Small Fish Ventures, we focus on early stage. So we're looking at pre-seed and seed. You're at that point, you're really betting on the team, right? So, yes, you're gonna see pitches that include financial metrics and projections. But that means very little to us when it's so early stage. So I would say avoid unnecessary fluff, like tell your story, get to your point, tell us why you're special, and paint like a very clear picture of your product roadmap and your team to show us, how you're going to scale. I think pitches can sometimes be unnecessarily long because you want to tell the investor absolutely everything. Like that doesn't always resonate with the investor, I would say. Um, Avoid reading off your slides. Like that's what they tell you in in the MBA program. Just don't read off the slides. Avoid spending a lot of time, I think, on, market size. Focus on the problem, the solution, the team, and the pipeline. I think those are the most important things to have in your pitch, um, to make it like a pitch that's memorable in a positive way, I would say.
Yeah, thanks for that advice. I think I'm going to try carry that forward into my Management 5150 presentation that's coming up soon.
Yep.
So
Yep.
hopefully I'll share that with my team too, and we'll work on that together. So I wanted to ask you more about Eva. Anyone who's like heard of Eva, I'm sure most people have, know that she's like a very prominent figure, a great leader. So working with Eva, what kind of things have you learned like outside of the VC space?
Yeah, that's a great question because usually people would look to, Eva and obviously Alan, for, startup advice. And obviously I've learned so much from them, um, entrepreneurship wise and startup and VC wise through my job. Um, but I think working alongside and working so closely alongside Eva in particular, um, over the past few years, she really has taught me how to lead with compassion and integrity. Like anybody that knows Eva knows that she is very true to herself. She's very kind, understanding, and at the same time, she's like the hardest worker that you'll ever meet. And so she's actually also one of the only she's one of the few female managing partners at a Canadian VC fund. So like in particular, she really inspired me to be confident and to take up space in a respectful way, no matter where I am. And I've definitely learned a lot from her mentorship, but I think the biggest thing was just you should always be true to yourself and never compromise on your beliefs ever. Like Eva is the type of person where, she has two daughters and she's a mom. She's a wife and a mom first, and then she's a VC investor. And that was always something that she made clear and prioritized. And I absolutely respect her for that.
Yeah, I love that. I love that setting for your priorities and keeping that like top of mind and setting aside your values to like what you believe in, sticking up for those first. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for students or graduates who are looking to get involved in the VC space? You said it was very competitive, so yeah, do you have
Yes.
any advice for those students who are looking to get
Oh my
involved?
gosh. Oh my gosh, yes. I think the biggest thing, and it's sort of like a given at this point, but network like you've never networked before in your entire life. And I think the great thing about Schulich's MBA program is how they really from day one emphasize like how important it is to build that network. Because and they say, your network is your net worth, right? So um you should not be afraid to reach out to people. keep in mind LinkedIn is a great resource. You know, go look at all the funds in Canada. There's not that many. We are not like the States where there's an infinite number of VC funds. There's very few VC funds in Canada. So this is a very doable task. You know, look at all the VC funds in Canada and reach out to the analysts. So start from the bottom of the hierarchy, and just ask them for, you know, a couple of minutes to chat. Keep in mind, we like as an analyst myself, I do get a lot of those kind of, you know, messages on LinkedIn, and they're cold emails, they're cold messages. I don't always have time to respond to them, unfortunately. And I'm an analyst at a very small fund. So imagine an analyst at a bigger fund or a principal or a partner, right? They're not going to have the capacity or the bandwidth to necessarily respond to everybody. So you really have to go above and beyond to set yourself apart. Um, you know, go that extra mile. The advice I give people, and especially um, women that want to get into VC, is that you really have to go the extra mile. So, for example, look up a VC fund that's interesting to you. Maybe they dabble in, you know, sustainability tech or fintech or health tech or something that you're really, really passionate about or really interested in, right? And build your own thesis around that space. Show the VC fund or the analyst or whoever you're reaching out to that I'm more than just like a student who wants to talk to you and maybe get an internship. I'm really passionate about the space. I'm really curious about the space. I tell students to go that extra mile and write a thesis, like have your own investment thesis, build out your thesis. Or if you don't necessarily want to do that, build out a thesis for another fund or look at some opportunities for other funds and say, hey, I've researched these startups. They fit your thesis. Here's a quick deck on why I think, you know, they might be worth your time and your interest. I'm just a student. I just want to, you know, reach out to you, blah, blah, blah. You really have to go that extra mile. Because when we're hiring, we hire usually internally. It's usually analyst to analyst. Like, do you guys know anybody that could fit this role? We're hiring for an analyst. We're hiring for an intern. It's very internal. It's very network based. You want people to know your name before you enter the room. Um, so really, you know, go that extra mile. So reach out to people, but also be willing to ask for more than a coffee chat. Um, I think Chris Carter, he always gives this advice to students as well, where it's like, you know, you can't just ask for something. You have to, it has to be reciprocated. So what can you bring to the table as well? Um, so yeah, don't be afraid to network, but also go that extra mile. And I think it will help for sure.
Yeah, thank you. That's really good advice. Like multi-step advice, kind of step one, get your foot in the door through networking introductions, but then to set
Yes.
yourself apart from everyone that's doing that networking, you have to take that extra step, go the extra mile, set yourself apart. So that's really good. Thank you for that advice. So yeah, well, let's wrap it up a bit here. What's next for you? What's going on in life?
Well, you obviously already know this, but I am going on maternity leave very soon. And I'll be taking time off to grow my family and focus on this new, you know, crazy, important, amazing chapter in my life. After that, who knows? I think I've worked really hard to build a strong, genuine network in the VC space, which is not that easy to do. And you know, I definitely want to leverage that. So whether that means coming back to um, the VC world as, you know, an investor, or maybe, you know, trying something more on the operational side with a startup, whether that's, you know, through a portfolio company of our own or starting something myself, who knows? We'll see. I'm just, I think one of the things I've really learned through the MBA program, but also through just working in VC, is that you really have to be comfortable with not knowing and just going with the flow, and being comfortable with, you know, discomfort and not necessarily knowing your next step. So I'm excited. I'm excited to see what happens, and I'm not worried. So we'll see. We'll see what
I'm
happens.
excited too. Excited to meet my nephew soon, and
Yes.
Best of luck on that next chapter in your life. Thanks
Thank
for
you.
stopping
Thank
by.
you. No worries. Thank you for having me.